Hey everyone, welcome to the Pawareness podcast, and thanks for joining me. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, and also check us out at pawareness.org and on Instagram at pawareness_official. On Instagram, we are doing submissions for Pet of the Week, where you can submit your foster pet, and we'll pick one winner every month, and we'll give $200 to their choice of charity or foster. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Pawareness podcast. Today I have Laura Sinclair with the International Dog Rescue Organization. And I want to go ahead and let you go ahead and introduce yourself and the organization and what it is that you guys do.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Laura Sinclair, and I'm a volunteer for International Dog Rescue. International Dog Rescue kind of has its roots from 2011 when Jill, the founder, went over to Romania and saw how bad the conditions was in the public and private shelters over there. There were many street dogs, and the situation was just uncomparable to the UK. So Jill had an idea that she wanted to rescue these dogs. And so at first she established a dog shelter in England and started building that up. And then in 2017 founded International Dog Rescue as a way of being able to bring the dogs safely over from Romania to the UK to enable them to be rehomed. Since 2017, we've helped to rehome over 500 dogs.
That's amazing. And my question for you is do you specifically just work with Romania then, or are you working with other parts of Europe?
Currently, we're just established in Romania. The charity is like only 4 years old, so it's still like in its early infancy, and it's reliant on volunteers, on the funds that we can get. So we're just all volunteers doing this. No one, we're a non-profit organization, and we just rely on people to help sponsor the dogs to bring them over. We're always fundraising. That's actually my role. I'm the volunteer fundraiser for International Dog Rescue, and so hopefully we can get established and become bigger and bigger. But for now, we're bringing dogs over from Romania to the United Kingdom.
And that's what I was going to ask was what exactly it is that you're doing, and do you have a background in that? When did you start actually with the organization itself?
Mine's just a little bit convoluted. So I was living in Hull, which is where Oakwood Dog Rescue is based. And they were asking for volunteer dog walkers to come in the evenings and weekends. And you could just turn up just during those dog walking hours. And who doesn't love walking dogs?
Right.
And, I just started doing that. I was training to do a 50-kilometer hike up a mountain. And, it was great to train with these dogs. So I had all these little training partners. So it was a great way of getting exercise and just spending time with furry companions. And I fell in love with this one little doggy who unfortunately needed knee surgery. So she needed a foster home. So we offered up our home. We'd never fostered before. I had pet dogs growing up. So it was a new challenge. And she was called Smokey, this little dog. And so she had this surgery on both of her knees. She had to be crated. She had to rest up. And then I found out that she was originally from Romania, which I didn't really know about the situation at the time. I'd been to parts of Europe where I'd seen a stray dog population, but I hadn't been aware of the situation in Romania. So once I found out this, I started researching and found out about International Dog Rescue. And so I messaged them saying I'd like to volunteer. I want to help more dogs like Smokey, because she was just the sweetest girl. She just wanted love. She just wanted companionship. And that's what dogs just really want, is human attention and to be fed and to be looked after. They're man's best friend. So I volunteered to help start fundraising, and they were doing a trip out to Romania. So I volunteered to go a week's notice. The founder, Jill, was like, okay, send over your money. I'll book you on the flight. I was a last minute addition. And the girls I went with were experienced kennel workers. They worked for Oakwood Dog Rescue, and they volunteered to go out to Romania. So, they're doing incredible stuff. Not only do they do this as their job, they also volunteer with International Dog Rescue on top of this. It was just incredible. And the sites were just nothing I've ever seen before. You kind of have this image of kennels and, it's in an indoor building and there's bedding and there's food. And it's just nothing like that there. The dogs are just exposed to all the elements. I went in the February and it was snowing. The water was iced over. So the dogs were trying to like tip over the water bowls to get to any liquid because it just wasn't available. It just freeze. It was like minus 30 degrees as well. The food's just thrown in and they only fed maybe once a day at the most. And this isn't your good quality food. This is just dry biscuits. And the dogs are fighting because, there is no matching on which dog will get on with which dog. They're just all thrown into a kennel and hope for the best. So it was quite an eye-opening situation, but the girls really did look after me and, made sure I was safe, made sure the dogs were safe. And, it was a really hard but like rewarding situation at the same time.
So normally I talk to people from North America. This is one of the first, I talk to people that do things from North America outside of, maybe Mexico, Canada. But this is really one of the first times I've talked to an organization outside of the US, specifically Europe. And so I know that you mentioned you did research on the dog situation in Romania. What's that like? Like, it sounds like it's specifically bad there, or are there other countries it's bad too? Like, why specifically Romania? What's that like?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And this comes back to like the 1960s, 1970s, where they were being ruled by a dictator called Nikolai Ceausescu. And he decided to implement something called systemization, which he decided he wanted to build these tower blocks, remove villages, remove hamlets and towns. So he would take people out of rural Romania and put them into these tower blocks. And the problem was the people who had like their livestock, their pet dogs, their pet cats were no longer allowed to take these animals into the apartment blocks that they were forced to live in. They actually fashioned it of North Korea. Like, this dictator decided that North Korea had the great idea of these tower blocks and urban living. So people were just forced into apartments. They were forced to release their dogs and their cats, and a lot of them weren't neutered. So these dogs and cats, were left on the streets, left in the countryside, and just bred and bred and bred until they got to their millions. So you all of a sudden in the 90s had millions of stray dogs roaming Romania in packs, and occasionally they would attack people as well because they weren't being fed, they weren't being looked after. It's a really heartbreaking situation, something that was kind of the fault of mankind, like invoking these policies. And so it wasn't the everyday Romanians, doing, it was this dictator, but it just led to this awful situation. And then over the years, you had these big packs of dogs and they were kind of left alone. There wasn't any euthanasia or anything, but in 2013, there was a new law that was passed because of, unfortunately, there was a couple of deaths from these packs of dogs. So they implemented this new policy, I think in 2013, where they would euthanize the dogs, and it wouldn't be done in a humane manner at all. They were taken off the streets, taken to the shelters and quickly put down, quite barbaric. So this caused outrage with the rest of the European Union, who wanted to go and help. So a lot of non-profits and charities and animal welfare groups, became more aware of the situation in Romania and wanted to help.
I mean, obviously it impacted you as a person getting to go there and see that. For someone who hasn't been to Romania and have seen that, what was that like one takeaway? How did that change you when you saw that?
I couldn't go there and solve the problem because it's bigger than one person, it's bigger than one organization. But I knew that, if I gave up some free time and the occasional finances, I would be able to change the world for one animal. Over the years we've helped save over 500. So we're not changing the world, but we have changed the world for 500 dogs and continue to change the world for many more.
I guess COVID's kind of changed some things up, but are there any trips that are planned to Romania anytime soon? And can anyone listening, if they want to do that, can they work with you guys, or how does that work?
So At the moment, we've got the mixture of COVID and Brexit in the UK. So people have to apply for visas now to go to Romania. So that's a new situation. Normally, we'd be going out to Romania every couple of months because we want to go and assess the dogs that we're going to bring over. Want to try and improve the shelter conditions. We visit private shelters as well. So as well as the public shelters, which are kill shelters, unfortunately, the dogs only have a certain time allocated it there. They've got 45 days to find a home. Unfortunately, adoption rate's really low there. So pre-COVID, we were going every couple of months, and we have a website where you can sign up for and come out with us. And, there's a mixture of like people like myself who've never been to dog shelter before, but just nosing around wanting to adopt a dog. And the Romanian shelters are very different. To the really experienced, people who do this as a living and are giving up their free time to help more dogs. So it is a really rewarding experience, quite difficult at times, but I would encourage anyone who's interested to look into it and, look at our website, look at our videos and kind of get a feel for what we do.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, even me personally, that sounds something, and it's those hard experiences that I feel like really expand you. And being just aware of the problem is how I feel is kind of like what motivates to make the change sometimes.
Absolutely. And, there was the heartwarming moments when you're there as well. There was a kennel which housed the small dogs. So I went inside and there was 2 dogs cowering at the back and they just didn't want to come out. So I had to plonk myself on the floor. And you have to bear in mind that the shelter staff are not cleaning these regular. So there's lots of dog excrement all over the kennel floor. So I had to plonk myself in the cleanest spot and try to coax the dogs out. So it took me about half an hour, but finally Captain came over and sat on my knee and his friend quickly followed. And, over the week that I was there, I built up a relationship with them. So they went from being genuinely terrified of humans to, trusting us, which is just seeing the walls break down. And then this was 2019 when I went, so 2 years ago now. And they both got their forever homes, which was just so rewarding to seeing them going from the corner of a kennel shelter to being in someone's lap. It's just, that's the really rewarding experience from it.
I know that you mentioned you go and assess the dogs that are there.
Yeah.
What are some things that you look for in a dog to bring it back? Or I guess maybe not look for, I don't know how, what's the right way to ask that?
No, that's a really good question. So I didn't assess them because I was a first-time volunteer, so I didn't really have the experience. But we would have a list of dogs who were really friendly, the ones who we think could handle going from Romania to the UK, because this is a really long bus journey. They are taken from Romania and they travel overland to France and then get the ferry to the UK. And then that's where they might go to a forever home directly, because we do a foster to adopt program, or they might go to one of our partner shelters, such as Oakwood Dog Rescue in Hull. And so it's quite a long journey, and it's quite taxing on a person. So it's really, really taxing on a dog who doesn't know what's happening. They've gone from this horrible shelter to being put in a bus and coming over to the UK. It is quite traumatizing for them. So we need to know if the dog's going to be able to withstand stuff like that. And then so the friendly dogs, we assess them, and sometimes they might be different in the shelter in Romania. Sometimes we see dogs who have post-traumatic stress disorder, to be honest. So they become quite happy in Romania, but it can take a couple of months to bring them over, and they can be quite traumatized when they come to the UK. And then we've had other dogs who were really terrified in Romania, who we couldn't touch, and we bring them over and they're so happy. They know they're safe. They just kind of relax and become really good companions for people. So try to assess them the best we can, and see if do we think they'd be friendly with children as well, because lots of families want to adopt. So we have to decide would this dog be only for adults? Would it be okay with children? And sometimes we might be able to cat assess them as well. So we want to make sure they can get along with cats.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, like you said, it doesn't make sense for a family to have a dog and it's, kind of aggressive or whatever.
You have to make sure you're doing the right thing for the family and for the dog. So, a lot of the charities like to match the dogs to the right family. So it's not always this is the cutest dog and would look great in photos. This is like a dog that's going to match your family and your lifestyle. Some dogs are more active, some are more docile. So there's all these different factors.
Like, okay, so the dog goes in this kill shelter in Romania. That's a 45-day window, right? How do dogs over there get brought there? And why is it 45 days? Is it just because there's so many? And once they're in there, it's just like, is that how that works? And then once they're in there, do people come to adopt them, or how does that work?
So in the public shelter, in the kill shelters, they can be brought in a variety of ways. So some people might have adopted a dog and now are bringing it because they no longer wish to have it as a family member. There's lots of stray dogs as well, like street dogs who are roaming and they're caught by the staff there, which isn't the nicest way. Is they use the loops, really traumatizing for the dogs. So they're essentially, is it the pole they get over the neck and are dragged into the van. So it tends to be men who do these jobs as well. So this is why the Romanian dogs can be quite scared of men at times, because this is what they're used to seeing, and a lot of the shelter staff are men as well, and they don't get like the love and affection, unfortunately. So you've got street dogs and abandoned pets. Sometimes people will feed the dogs and they'll be just outside the shop, but it doesn't actually belong to anyone. So some people might hand the dog over thinking it's compassionate, and unfortunately there is only this small window of 45 days. When we first started working there, we sometimes see dogs for months, and you're trying, because we're limited on how many dogs we can bring back. We need more shelters in the UK to take the dogs and help us rehome them. If we want to rehome more, we're limited by these resources, unfortunately. We want to help as many as we can, but like every animal rescue, we have resources and limitations. So we would see these dogs for like months in the shelters, and then it turned out there was only a 45-day window. So some of these dogs had just somehow maybe not been noticed by the staff, because sometimes the staff don't even know that they're there. I'll get to that in a second. And so we found out there was 45 days. So we actually started this campaign to try and bring as many as we can and save them. And it costs now £225 per dog to bring them over, because they're being transported and they have to have their paperwork, they have to have vaccinations, they have to have an EU passport. So there's a lot of things that go into it. And, we had to like raise money and just try and raise awareness of this and hope that people would adopt, so we can just clear the shelter as much as we can. There was a rescue in Germany who also came to like our rescue to help the dogs as well. So they took some in to just try and stop as many dogs as we could being put to sleep. The shelter is not the nicest conditions at all. Like, they're not very well fed. We've had situations where we've had a dog reserved to us, like we're going to be able to transport. And we had this one dog called Taco. They went to prepare her to be traveling to the UK, and then they realized that she had puppies that were a few weeks old, and no one had gone in to check on her, none of the shelter staff. So there was this dog with puppies, and we were just really shocked, because we hadn't been able to go there because of COVID, and the staff just hadn't bothered to look in at all. So she has to defend herself and the puppies because there is a lack of food in these shelters. It's just horrific. Like, it's so hard to get this across, like how bad it is, because sometimes we get like, why are you helping dogs abroad? Why aren't you helping dogs in the UK? And it's like, we would never treat dogs like, we don't have any shelters like this in the UK. This is a unique situation, and it's not the dog's fault that it's born in a different country. We just want to help them.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. It's like, I don't think people realize how bad these shelters are. Like, the shelter is supposed to be just that, like sheltering. And it's like, that's what's the alternative is. It's definitely eye-opening for me. Like, I didn't know that it was like that before going, talking with you right now. So it's one of those things where I just think more and more people need to be aware. And even if it's a rescue listening to this, and maybe it means opening up shop somewhere closer to Romania or another country like that, maybe that can help. Yeah. But for the International Dog Organization, then, what are the plans there, right? I mean, obviously, you can only, you have a finite number of resources. In terms of locations, is there just one location? Do you plan on opening up more? What's that like? What are the goals?
Yeah, we have two goals, and the first goal is to build our own shelter, and this would just provide better resources for the dog. They would be safer. They would have staff on board, really be looked after, be fed, have proper shelter, because Romania goes from -30 to +40 degrees. And they're in these little wooden huts with some straw thrown in. And so in the very cold, it's very cold. And in the hot, there's just no shade. So the dogs are in the most extreme conditions. So we want to be able to build a shelter that can accommodate for that. That would be the goal. And unfortunately, a lot of the dogs succumb to disease and sometimes die from injuries because there's a lot of fights there as well. So, it can be so heartbreaking when you've helped raise the funds for a dog, and, our wonderful supporters have given the name to a dog, and we find out that unfortunately it's passed away. And so you have to tell your supporters that this has happened, and you just feel so gutted, especially when it's so close. The dog was so close to being able to come and find a forever home. That can be the really hard part about it. If we had a shelter of our own, we could really minimize that happening. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, this is the reason why I do this podcast, is because of this. And okay, so let's say I'm here, right? Someone listening in California that wants to adopt a dog from Romania. I know that you mentioned yourself, and then there's another organization in Germany. Do you have to, is that like the middleman? Is that like the focal point? You have to go through one of you guys to get a dog in Romania. You just can't call up a Romanian shelter and be like, hey, I want this dog, or I want 10 dogs right now. That just doesn't work like that. I know you were mentioning different paperwork needed and whatnot. So I'm assuming there's that, right?
Yeah. The amazing thing about the internet is that we actually do get people from all over the world, and especially America. A lot of Americans do send donations to us, even if they can't directly help physically. And then we get asked can I adopt a dog from Romania to America? But unfortunately, we just don't have the resources to set up the paperwork. And one thing that we like having in the UK is rescue backup. So even if International Dog Rescue adopts directly, we know that there was shelter space. If anything does go wrong, there's no point in rescuing a dog and having nowhere to go if family situations don't work out. Sometimes things just aren't right for people. So we like to have that rescue backup to make sure that the dog is safe and, is going to have a good life. So we don't have the resources in other countries to do that yet. I know Mickey Rourke, the actor, he also visited Romania for a film, and he was so shocked by the stray dog situation. He adopted a dog from Romania himself, and there was talks that he wanted to open up a shelter, but I not heard anything since about that. But I think that there is possibility to adopt from Romania, but it wouldn't be our organization that could do that yet.
I mean, you guys are getting there 500 dogs in what, 3 years? 500 dogs. I mean, that's amazing. And okay, so if we can't adopt dogs, what about someone who wants to donate, right? That's listening right now. Where can they do that at? Where can they get in touch with you guys?
So we have the website, and we mostly accept donations through PayPal. So we're set up to receive American dollars, Australian dollars. We've had people from all over the globe, donate, which makes it feel really special. Knowing that someone from a different country, a different continent wants to help, it makes such a difference, because, we need volunteers, we need donations. There's just always resources that are needed until this situation's resolved. The stray dog population has decreased in Romania, but there's still quite a long way to go. It's still in its hundreds of thousands. It's gone from millions to hundreds of thousands, but it's still a huge, substantial amount of dogs out there. The more that the dogs are being neutered and spayed, we're breaking that cycle as well. Stopping puppies being born in the shelter. I think that's a really big thing to stop, because these are not conditions for a puppy to grow up in. We also help some private shelters as well. And when we say private shelter, I think people think of luxury, but most of the time it's some wonderful human being who has a house with a little bit of land that they create their own little shelter to help as many dogs as they can. So I think that's always a wonderful thing to see. But they're limited by resources as well. The average wage in Romania is about €500 a month. So you can imagine, when you have to neuter and spay, that's really costly. And feeding the dogs, providing shelter as well. So sometimes we help with the private shelter dogs, and we help get them adopted in the UK as well. There's just so much, even people sharing our posts and creating that awareness that really helps, because you never know who's going to see it and who can help. Like, we hold raffles and auctions and stuff where we sell items. We have t-shirts to help funds. I don't know if you can see my t-shirt. International
Oh
Dog
yeah,
Rescue.
International Dog Rescue. All right.
So we have some merchandise that, people donate as well. So like all the funds go to the dogs. There's always medical costs because the dog's not kept in the nicest situation. So sometimes we have to do x-rays for broken bones, surgeries. There's sometimes have diseases like heartworm that need correcting before they can travel. So, like everyone who works in rescue, these things just never stop.
And what social media are you guys on? Like
Instagram, Twitter, we've got a Facebook group, a Facebook page, we've got the website. Yeah, like we're quite accessible. Like, we love hearing from people as well. We love people following the journeys and, interacting with us, helping raise that awareness, basically.
and all of those links, no matter where you're listening at, will be available in the link in the description below. And you guys can see everything we talked about. But Laura, thank you so much. It was
Thank you, Chris.
so great and eye-opening for myself to have you on. I'm really, really glad I was able to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.